So, the mitzvah of Kesivas Sefer Torah, which according to the Sefer Achinuch is the 613th mitzvah of the Torah, is derived from a pasuk in Sefer Dvarim, Parshas Vayelech, Perek Lamed Aleph, pasuk Yud Tes. It says, "Va'at kisvu lechem es hashira hazos, v'lamdos b'nei Yisrael simu v'fiyam, leman tiyeh li hashira hazos le'ed b'nei Yisrael." So it means, so now write this song for yourselves and teach it to Bnei Yisrael. Place it in their mouth so that this song shall be for me a witness against Bnei Yisrael. So this is the source that Kesivas Sefer Torah, the mitzvah of Kesivas Sefer Torah, that is a mitzvah d'oraisa. So we have two Gemaras pertaining to the mitzvah of Kesivas Sefer Torah that discuss the mitzvah. So the first one is a Gemara in Sanhedrin on Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. So it says Kesivas Sefer Torah Lishmo. The Gemara is commenting on the concept in the Mishnah. It discusses the requirements of a king. And one of the requirements of a king is to write a Sefer Torah for himself. So Tana, we learn in Raisa, as long as he didn't acquire it, he didn't get it from his father. He didn't inherit it from his father. Amar Rabba. So Rabba says, Afal Pisha Hanicholo Avosav La'adam Sefer Torah Mitzvah Lichtov Mishalo. That even if a person got a Sefer Torah or inherited a Sefer Torah from his father, there's a mitzvah for him to write it himself. Shneimar, because it says in the pasuk, Va'ata kisvu lechem es hashira. In the pasuk we just said before, that because it says Va'ata kisvu lechem es hashira, so that's why you have to write a Sefer Torah for yourself. So the Gemara in Menachos and Daf Lamed Amud Aleph, it says Va'amar Rav Yoshua bar Abba, Amar Rav Gidol Amar Rav, Halokeach Sefer Torah min hashuk k'chotev mitzvah min hashuk. That somebody who gets or who buys a Sefer Torah from the market, it's as if he took a mitzvah from the shuk. And we'll discuss later what that actually means. But the point is, Kosvo, if he wrote it himself, the Torah, the pasuk equates him to a person who got the Torah from Har Sinai. So, those two Gemaras were sources regarding the mitzvah of Kesivas Sefer Torah. So now we want to understand what the essence of the mitzvah, or the nature of the mitzvah of Kesivas Sefer Torah. So the Rambam in Hilchos Tefillin Mezuzah and Sefer Torah, in Perek Zayin Halacha Aleph, so he says, Mitzvah saseh al kol ish v'ish miyisrael lichtov Sefer Torah la'atzmo, that there is a mitzvah on every Jew to write a Sefer Torah for himself. Shene'amar va'ata kisva lechem es hashira hazos, because it says in the pasuk va'ata kisva lechem es hashira hazos, the pasuk in Vayelech, which we said tells you to write a Sefer Torah. Klomar kisvu es Torah sheyesh ba shira zu lefisha ein kosven es Torah parshas. So this means that you have to write a Sefer Torah, and the shira hazos that the pasuk is talking about is hazinu, because after Vayelech it discusses hazinu. But since you can't write a Sefer Torah parshios, you can't choose specific parshios. You have to write the whole thing. You have to write so that's the source of writing a whole Torah. Sefer Torah, and even if a person acquires a Sefer Torah or inherits a Sefer Torah from his father, mitzvah lichtov mishalo. There's a mitzvah to write it yourself. V'im kisvu biyado, and if you write it yourself by your own hand, harihu ki'ilu kibud Har Sinai. It's as if he got the Torah from Har Sinai. And if he doesn't know how to write it himself, other people can write it for him. And if a person fixes even one letter that was mistaken in a Torah, it's as if he wrote the entire Torah. So it seems that, according to the Rambam, the fact that he says mitzvah say al kol ish v'ish miyisrael lichtov Sefer Torah, it seems that he is emphasizing the writing itself of the Sefer Torah, as opposed to the Minchas Chinuch, or the Sefer Achinuch rather, in the Sefer Achinuch in mitzvah Taryag, the 613th mitzvah. He discusses mitzvah lichtov kol echem Yisrael Sefer Torah la'atzmo. So the Sefer Achinuch writes she'nitztavinu lihiyos l'kol ish Yisrael Sefer Torah. Now there's a mitzvah for each Jew to have a Sefer Torah. And if somebody writes his own Sefer Torah, that's very praiseworthy, that's a wonderful thing. And like Chazal said in Menachos Daf Lamed Amud Aleph, Kisvu, when the pasuk says Kisvu, Klomer biyado, it means to write it by hand, by your own hand. So and the pasuk equates you, the Torah equates you to a person who got the Torah from Har Sinai. And somebody who it's impossible for him to write it by hand. Yiskor mi sheich tevenulo, that he can hire someone that'll write it for him. But al zeh nemar, on that it says in the Torah in Dvar Perek Lamed Aleph Pasuk Yites va'atikis v'lechem esashir azos v'lamdos b'nei Yisrael. So the pasuk in Vayelech, it says that you have to write this shira in order to teach b'nei Yisrael. Klomar kisvu lachem Torah sheyish ba shira zos. So write for yourself a Torah that has this shira in it. So, as opposed to the Rambam before, which we said, his lashon was the fact that he said mitzvah kol ish v'ish Yisrael lichtov sefer Torah, which says that you have to write a sefer Torah. The Sefer Achinuch says shenistavinu liyos l'kol ish v'Yisrael. He says that there's a mitzvah on each person to have a sefer Torah. So the Minchas Chinuch recognizes this distinction in his commentary on the Sefer Achinuch, and in the wording of the Rambam and the Sefer Achinuch, and he poses a question as to what the nature of the mitzvah of Kesivas Sefer Torah is. Is it fulfilled through the Ksiva, through the writing of the actual Torah, or through owning a Sefer Torah that you can learn from, so that you can learn from it? So he says that it's a machlokes rishonim. So according to the Rambam, we said lichtov lo Sefer Torah. Since he said lichtov lo Sefer Torah, the Minchas Chinuch is medayik from the lashon of the Rambam that he says lichtov, that the mitzvah is to write it, and the Sefer Achinuch says that the mitzvah on each member of Bnei Yisrael that you should have a Sefer Torah from the lashon of Leo, so that you should have it, so that you should be able to learn from it. So the Rush takes the Minchas Chinuch's idea one step further, and he asks an important question. He says, why do we find, as Mana said, that most people aren't knowing to fulfill the mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah? Why do people avoid, or why do people not really do this mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah? So it seems that this really only applied to the time of the Rush, because nowadays we do have relatively often that people contribute to Hachnos Sefer Torah. So by the Rush's time, people would just, the Sofer would write a Sefer Torah, and then nothing would happen with it, and that's done. I mean, they'd read Torah from it, but nothing would really happen. But if it's a mitzvah deraisa, so why doesn't everyone do this? So he answers that Bisman Hazeh, we don't write a Sefer Torah to learn Torah from it. We write it, and we end up putting it in the Aron, and maybe we'll dance with it on Simchas Torah, but we don't use it for Talmud Torah. We don't learn from it like when people sit down and learn, we don't learn from a Sefer Torah from the scroll. So the Rosh says that really, if a person writes Sfarim that have to do with Torah, Sfarim on like Chumashim and Mishnayos and Perushim, then writing those Sfarim in order to have the Torah to learn from it, that's the mitzvah of Kesivas Sefer Torah. So why does the Rosh say this? So he says just look at the pasuk. The pasuk says, Kisvu lechem es hashira, that you have to write the shira, that you have to write the shira in order to lamdos b'nei Yisrael, in order so that you should be able to teach b'nei Yisrael. So as Mana said, we don't do that with the Sefer Torah scroll itself, but by writing Sfarim on Torah, by writing Sfarim Chumashim and Perushim and Mishnayos, so that is the mitzvah. To teach V'lamdas b'nei Yisrael is the way that we fulfill Kesivas Sefer Torah. So it seems that there are two parts of the pasuk according to the Rush, and you have to take both parts seriously. So the first one is Kisvu lachem, and the other part is V'lamdas b'nei Yisrael. So according to the Rambam, even if the reason is to enable Talmud Torah, still the mitzvah is Kisvu lachem. It's so that you should write it. But according to the Rush, he says no. He says Kisvu lachem is just the hechsher to the actual ikr of V'lamdas b'nei Yisrael in order to have a Sefer Torah, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Talmud Torah. And that's the mitzvah of Kesivas Sefer Torah. So we might be able to explain that the source of the machlokes between the Rush, Sefer Chinuch, and the Rambam is what emphasis you put on the pasuk, which part of the pasuk you focus on. According to the Rambam would say that you focus on Kisvu lachem, that you focus on the actual writing of the Sefer Torah. And he says that you have to write the Sefer Torah, that's the actual mitzvah, and it V'lamdas b'nei Yisrael, and you'll end up using it to learn Torah. But according to the Rush and the Sefer Chinuch, they would focus on the second part of the pasuk that says V'lamdas b'nei Yisrael, that the actual mitzvah is to have a Sefer Torah and to learn from it. But the only way, how are you supposed to get a Sefer Torah? By writing it. So Kisvu Lachem, that you have to write the Sefer Torah in order to have it and be able to learn from it.
As Tyler just said, the Rosh and the Rambam learn out different parts of the pasuk in order to teach us what exactly the mitzvah is of Kesivas Sefer Torah. The Rosh said that we learn it out from Vilamda. That the reason behind the mitzvah is Vilamda, so that you can teach it to Bnei Israel, and therefore that is the ikr, the main part of the mitzvah. However, this brings up a difficult problem for the Rosh. We hold in many places in Shas, namely, specifically on this daf of Gemara, Chafal Alfam Beis in Sanhedrin, that lo darshin an taima dekra. We don't, just because we have the reason for a mitzvah, we're not going to use that to define when the mitzvah applies. So, how could the Rosh possibly say that just because the pasuk says vilamda, and that's the reason, that that's going to define where the mitzvah applies or not? So, the answer to this is actually on Sanhedrin Chaf Aleph and Beis, where a possible answer is that if you look, we have a pasuk in the Torah. The Torah says the king should not have too many wives, so that they don't cause his heart to stray. And if you would say Lord Darshin and Tamid Kra, if you would say that we don't take the reason, namely that they cause him to stray, then it would appear that it should always be a blanket rule, no matter whether they'll cause him to stray or not. He can't have too many wives, which we say is 18. Yet, if you look in the Mishnah happens to have a machlokas. The machlokas is if he has, let's say he has a wife if he has wives that won't cause him to stray, is he allowed to have more than 18? So there are those opinions that say he can. So the Gemara asks the question. The Gemara says, how could Rabbi Yehuda say that we're going to allow if they're not going to cause him to stray, we're going to allow him to marry more than 18 wives? That's lo darshin. We paskin lo darshin on time of the Kra. How could he possibly hold that? So we answer, there's a difference between two different types of reasoning. You have the reasoning where the pasuk explicitly says, do this mitzvah, and it says the reason for it. And there are other cases where the pasuk says the mitzvah, and we say, oh, you know what the reason must be? It must be X and Y. But we can say there's a difference. We say lo darshin an time of the kra in a case that we don't use the reason to define the parameters of the mitzvah. In a case where we decide what the reason is. It doesn't say it explicitly in the pasuk. We decide that. But if the pasuk would explicitly say what the reason is, in that case, we would allow you to be dorish time of the kra, and that would allow you to define the parameters of the mitzvah based on what the reason is. And we see that actually applies to our mitzvah. It says Kesivas Sefer Torah Shir hazos v'lamdas b'nei Yisrael. The mitzvah is the ksiva. The reason is vilamda. So we say vilamda can define the parameters of the halacha. It's all good according to the Rosh. Now, there's several nafka-minas, practical applications, as to the machlokas between the Rosh and the Sefer Chinuch on one hand, and the Rambam on the other. To understand the nafka-minos, it's crucial to remember that the Rambam holds that the mitzvah is writing the Sefer Torah, and the Sefer Chinuch and the Rosh hold that the mitzvah is to have a Sefer Torah that you can learn from. The first nafka-mina is whether you can be yotzei your mitzvah through other means besides writing the Sefer Torah. Besides writing the Sefer Torah. It's a very good nafka-mina because that's exactly what the two opinions are arguing about. So the Gemara if you remember, the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Chaf Aleph and Beis said, Rabbah says that if somebody inherits a Sefer Torah, he's not yotzei his obligation. If you look on, and meaning that other modes of acquiring a Sefer Torah, other than writing a Sefer Torah, namely inheritance, do not work. But the Gemara in Menachos Lamed Amud Aleph, said that Rav says that if you buy a Sefer Torah, it's k'chotef mitzvah min hashuk. It's as if you grabbed a mitzvah from the market. Rashi explains that this expression means that you fulfilled the mitzvah, but just not in the optimal way. According to Rashi, this Gemara is saying that methods of acquiring a Sefer Torah other than writing, you are Yotzei. So, that they do work. And how could he possibly say that? According to Rashi, the Gemara in Menachos is arguing with the Gemara in Sanhedrin. How could he possibly say that the Gemara in Menachos is saying you are Yotzei through other means besides acquiring a Sefer Torah, and the Gemara in Sanhedrin is saying that you aren't Yotzei through other means besides writing a Sefer Torah? So the obvious answer is, no, it's a stira. It's a machlokes. In Sanhedrin we had the opinion of Rabbah, and he says you can't be Yotzei through other means. And by Menachos we quote the opinion of Rav, who says that you can be Yotzei through other means. And that's Rav's opinion. Rav is in Amora, the Rav is in Amora. They're allowed to argue. The more Lomdisha reason is you can say maybe there's a difference between the two cases of Sanhedrin and Menachos. By Sanhedrin, what was the case? You had an inheritance. But by Menachos, you were buying a Sefer Torah. So the practical difference between the two is obvious, that when you inherit a Sefer Torah, you're not doing anything. You're passively getting the Sefer Torah. But when you go to the shuk and the market and you buy a Sefer Torah, you're actively doing a mitzvah, and therefore you might be able to say that you're Yotzei when you actively acquire the Sefer Torah through other means, but you're not when you do it passively. And possibly Rashi holds that would be that there is a difference between whether you do it actively or passively. And now we have so it all works out according to Rashi. Rashi, depending on how you explain it, you make the steer go away. You say that either you say that it's a machlokes, and therefore there's no we just happen to hold. We can either hold like Menachos or we could hold like Sanhedrin, or you could say that maybe there's a difference between actively and passively. The difference is clearly whether passively works. In the first case, it would work. In the second answer, it would not work. But Rashi isn't the only opinion as to what the Gemara Menachos means by kechotik mitzvah min hashuk. If you look in Shulchan Aruch, Siman Ayin Reish, the Ramah says that if somebody buys a Sefer Torah, he's not Yotzei Bichlal. He's not Yotzei at all. So the obvious question is, the Ramah was an Achro. Rashi was a Rishon. How could the Ramah possibly argue with Rashi? So the Minchas Chinuch helps us understand that the Ramah's not arguing with Rashi because that's his opinion. He's trying to explain the Rambam. The Rambam, if you remember, he said the mitzvah is the writing. So according to him, the Gemara Menachos, which said that if you buy a Sefer Torah, you're Yotzei, you're Kechotik Mitzvah Min Hashuk, that can't possibly mean that you're Yotzei, because he holds that you're not Yotzei. So according to the Rambam, that the Gemara Menachos could not possibly be saying that you're being Yotzei. It must be. So the Ramah says, according to the Rambam, the Gemara Menachos must be saying that you're actually not being Yotzei. But however, if you would go like Rashi, or you would go like the Sefer Chinuch and the Rosh, you would say that you can say that the Gemara Menachos is saying that you're Yotzei, and the Gemara in Sanhedrin is possibly saying that you're not Yotzei. And you can absolve this stira depending on one of those two answers.
A second nafkamina tar sugya is brought down by the Torah Chaim, and he says a case where a person writes his own Sefer Torah, and then he donates it to a shul. So the Torah Chaim says that when he donates his written Sefer Torah to the shul, he is losing out on his mitzvah. So if you think about it, this seems to hold like the Rosh, because the Rosh says that the mitzvah is having your Sefer Torah, and when you give away the Sefer Torah, you're losing out on your mitzvah. The Rambam, however, would hold that you would not lose out on your mitzvah, because the Rambam says that the mitzvah is to write the Sefer Torah, and once you've written the Sefer Torah, you can give it away and still keep the mitzvah. The second part of this Nafkamina continues to the Gemara Megillah, which is talking about the fact that you're not allowed to sell your Sefer Torah except for two cases. Number one, if by selling the Sefer Torah it will enable you to get married. Or number two, by selling the Sefer Torah, you will be able to learn more Torah. Both the Rosh and the Rambam bring down this case in different contexts. The Rosh says in Hilchos Sefer Torah, Ve'omrani, and I say, Devadai mitzvah gadola hi lichto Sefer Torah. It's a big mitzvah to write the Sefer Torah. V'gam ein lemochra ela lumo Torah v'lisa isha. And also, you're not allowed to sell the Torah except for if it's to learn more Torah or to marry a woman. So over here, the Rosh is clearly grouping writing the Sefer Torah and the inability to sell the Sefer Torah. Now, the Rambam says also in Hilchos Sefer Torah Mezuzah Utfilin, Perek Yud Halacha Beis, he says that you're not allowed to sell the Sefer Torah except for the two cases, and he also mentions with this the fact that you have to honor the Sefer Torah. So this fits in very nicely with our Machlokas. The Rambam says that since the mitzvah is to write the Sefer Torah, once you've already written the Sefer Torah, you fulfilled your obligation. You fulfilled the mitzvah already. And the Rosh would hold that since the mitzvah is to have the Sefer Torah so that you can learn from it, if you give it away because of the fact that you need the Sefer Torah to learn from it, your mitzvah would go away as well. In fact, he would probably say that the reason you have to sell, you are able to sell the Torah is to be able to learn, is because that's the whole purpose of having the Sefer Torah, so that you can learn from it. And that's why you need to have the Sefer Torah. The fourth nafkamina between the Rambam and the Rosh is going to be whether women are chayav at writing the Sefer Torah. So we know from the words of the Rambam, since he says mitzvah kol ish ve'ish lichtov Sefer Torah, he clearly implies that it's only chayav for men. So the Shagasari is going to say that the Rambam must hold like the Rosh in the fact that they both say that the reason you need to write a Sefer Torah is that you can learn from it. So he says, "Vafilu lamad demashma l'chaora mitivrei harash," and even if the Rambam holds like the Rosh, deikar mitzvah Kesivas Sefer Torah hu bishom kedei lomod ba, that the reason that you need to write the Sefer Torah is that you can learn from it. V'kamasha kasav l'kaman b'sefer shachar zeh v'kamakom ha kasur ravusa dinashim berachas Torah. The women do make mitzvah Sefer Torah, so they clearly have an obligation of writing a Sefer Torah. Since they have, since they're chayav to learn Torah only about the minhagim that they're chayav in. K'mash kasav habeis Yosef be'orach chaim sof simin mem zayin b'shem hasmag. Okay. V'imisham she'inan chayavos b'harbe mitzvos kigon mitzvos asay shavas mangrama kiyotzevehem. And even though that women truly aren't chayav in mitzvos asay shavas mangrama, meaning they're not chayav in all mitzvos, im kain yochonu liftar as kol ha'olam kulo midin mitzvos Kesivas Sefer Torah. If it were true from the fact that you could make everybody potter from learning the Sefer Torah because they wouldn't be chayav in all of it and they wouldn't have to learn from it, therefore, it wouldn't make sense to say that because there's no single Jew that's chayav in every single mitzvah of the Torah. Sharei harbe mitzvos she'ena noheg v'Yisrael v'kahanim, because there are many mitzvos in the Torah that only kohanim are going to be chayav on, as opposed to Yisrael. V'afilu b'kohen hedyot eno noheg harbe mitzvah ela b'kohen gadol levad. And even for some kohanim, there are some mitzvos that apply only to the kohen gadol. V'harbe mehem mitzvos hamelech ve'in noheg b'chol adam, and also there are mitzvos that apply only to kings. Ela al karchach, rather against your will, halav milsi. It's not going to be a matter. It can't be that if there's an idea that you shouldn't have to write a Sefer Torah because you're not chayav in all of the mitzvos. Im kain, if so, hakinami, here also in manu tam lifter as hanashim mi mitzvah. So there's no reason for us to make the nashim pater from Sefer Torah. So he's clearly asking on the Rambam these two questions. So the Rosh would say, however, for these questions that the Shagasari asked on the Rambam, those questions are the exact reasons that what the Rosh holds, that the woman is indeed chayav to write the Sefer Torah. The first reason, like I said, because the women say berachas Torah, and therefore they need to learn Torah, and therefore they have to write the Sefer Torah. And the second reason, even if you say that the women are only chayav in some of the mitzvos, Still, nobody's chayiv in all the mitzvos, and therefore they're just like everybody else, and they'd have to write the Sefer Torah. Now, according to the Rambam, who we establish now that he holds that they're patur from learning. How could he say this? So the reason he says that women don't have to write Sefer Torah is based on a Gemara on Daf Memham and Beis. It's based on the fact that we make a juxtaposition between the two words uchshartem uchsavtem. We say that anyone who's not chayiv in wearing tefillin isn't going to be chayiv in writing tefillin either, and this applies also to anything like mezuzah or even the Sefer Torah, like it applies over here. So anytime that somebody's not chayiv in tefillin, they're not going to be able to write tefillin because any tefillin they write are going to be non-kosher. So from a logical perspective, if you think about it, if any Sefer Torah that a woman would write would become pasul, then for sure it would make sense that they can't be chayiv in writing it because if they wrote it, it would be pasul. So for sure, anyways, the woman wouldn't be chayiv in writing a Sefer Torah, and that's how the Rambam could say that women are chayiv or patur in writing a Sefer Torah.
So, just to review, we began by quoting a pasuk in Vayelech as the source for the mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah. So we then went on to a Gemara in Sanhedrin, which told us that inheriting a Sefer Torah does not fulfill your mitzvah. And then the Gemara in Menachos said, according to Rashi, that buying a Sefer Torah is a lesser form of a mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah, yet it's still a mitzvah. So then we then quoted the machlokas between the Rambam and the Sefer HaChinuch. The Rambam held that the mitzvah was to actually write the Sefer Torah, whereas the Sefer HaChinuch held the mitzvah was to have a Sefer Torah so that you can learn from it your entire life. The Rosh then said that the mitzvah to write a Sefer Torah extends to writing Sfarim that we actually learn today. We then went on to give 4 nafkaminos between the Rambam and the Sefer HaChinuch. So the first nafkamina was whether you can fulfill your mitzvah through means other than writing a Sefer Torah. So according to the Rambam, no. Specifically the mitzvah is to write it. And according to the Sefer HaChinuch, definitely by an active method of acquiring a Sefer Torah, like buying it, you would be able to fulfill it in other ways. And possibly even passively, like by inheriting, you would be able to fulfill your mitzvah. The second nafkamina is if you donate the Torah to your shul, or you sell it, do you lose the mitzvah if you do that? So according to the Rambam, since the mitzvah is to write it, then no, you already fulfilled your mitzvah. But according to the Sefer Chinuch, you would lose your mitzvah because the mitzvah is to have it to learn from. The third nafkamina was when is the mitzvah? Like when does this mitzvah apply? So according to the Rambam, although we say Zerisa Makdim the mitzvahs, and you should do it as soon as possible, you really only have to do it. You have to do it at any point in your life. But according to the Sefer HaChinuch, your mitzvah begins when you're bar mitzvah, and it extends to the end of your life, but it must be done as soon as possible. And the fourth nafkamina is, are women obligated in writing a Sefer Torah? According to the Rambam, no. But according to the Sefer HaChinuch, we said yes, women are obligated